Good morning, friends. I hope that uh, both video and audio are working today, that we're having a better day than yesterday, where something was constantly not working. Hello to Eleanor, Poonam, Geeta, and Elaine, as well as any other friend that is watching, but being a little bit silent on the live chat. So this morning we will be reading from the Bhikkhuni Samyutta as usual. So there is a link to the sutta. Oh, hello, Geeta and Michael. All right, wonderful. You can see me, great. Hopefully you can also hear me. So you can click on the link and we can start reading the sutta all in one breath, as I like to do. Then contemplate it a few moments, and then we can explore it together a little bit further. And if at any time you have questions, feel free to type them in the live chat, and we'll have a bit of a conversation hopefully later. And Gita is asking, what was your illness? We were very sad to hear you were not well. Ah, thank you. You're very sweet. It's just the nature of having a body, really. So for the past few years, I've been struggling with chronic fatigue. And sometimes it gets pretty bad. And in these past couple of days, could be better, let's put it that way. So there's a lot of brain fog, and as well as different physical ailments that one needs to deal with. But it's another reason to practice more, isn't it? Oh, thank you for your wishes, Geeta, and welcome to Galaxy from Malaysia. Good to see you, friend. All right, so let's start by reading some words of Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. Atsavati. Then in the morning, the bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā dressed. She sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's abiding. Then Māra, the evil one, approached the bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā and said to her, "Whose creed do you approve of, bhikkhuni?" "I don't approve of anyone's creed, friend." "Under whom have you shaved your head? You do appear to be an ascetic, yet you don't approve of any creed. So why wander as if bewildered?" And the bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā replies, "Outside here, the followers of creed place their confidence in views. I don't approve of their teachings. They're not skilled in the Dhamma. But there's one born in the Sakyan clan, the Enlightened one without an equal, Conqueror of all, Māra's subduer, who everywhere is undefeated, everywhere freed and unattached, the one with vision who sees all, attained to the end of all kamma, liberated in the extinction of acquisitions. That blessed one is my teacher. His is the teaching I approve." Then Māra, the evil one, realizing the bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā knows me, sad and disappointed, disappeared right there. So we can close our eyes and contemplate these words of Dhamma for a few moments. Isn't it wonderful? Always lots of Dhamma Sukha when reading the suttas. So as usual, in the in all the suttas of the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, we have sort of similar setup where the bhikkhuni in question wakes up, goes on alms rounds, does her starts her life in the way that usually monastics start their day. Go for alms, and then find a quiet place where to go and practice meditation. And they all, as we've seen, have a thing for the blind man's grove. So as Venerable Sīsupacālā, who is one of the three sisters of Venerable Sariputta, all four of the siblings, all of them are enlightened. So they practiced and attained full liberation. So Venerable Sīsupacālā, just like the other fellow bhikkhunis, as she's sitting in the forest, is attacked, so to speak, by Māra, who comes and tries to stir up her mind. And in this case, we see that Māra asks her a question with the assumption that there will be a sort of usual answer. So she asks us, what do you believe in, basically, bhikkhuni? Who are you? What sort of belief or view or standpoint or stance do you have? And surprisingly so, she replies, I don't approve of anyone's belief, friend. So creed, in this case, we can, I think that Venerable Bhikkhu picked this word because it was the best choice of words that he could find for this context. But fundamentally, I seem to understand that the word he has translated pretty much is referring to kind of any sort of spiritual idea or different spiritual views that were happening at the time of the Buddha that actually are not terribly different than all the different sort of ideas that are still present to this day. And so Māra sees how the bhikkhuni looks like an ascetic, looks like a spiritual practitioner, and then makes the assumption that just like any sort of spiritual practitioner out there, she will have a particular belief of one sort. And being a monastic in the West, where we're constantly, sort of profiled by people, this rings very familiar. A lot of times people think we are Hare Krishnas, for example, and so they will approach us with a sort of set of assumptions on what our stances and belief systems are. Or, there's perhaps, if they don't think of us as Hare Krishna practitioners, they just perceive us as religious fanatics. So I guess one degree or the other, we kind of are. But besides the point, there's that assumption comes with a lot of expectations, a lot of ideas on what a spiritual practitioner is, what a monastic is, and how their mind works and how their practice is and why they do the things that they do. So in reality, it seems like Māra's question is not really a question, but rather an assumption. It's a rhetorical question. And when Venerable Sīsupacālā gives such a kind of unsettling answer or surprising answer, Māra is unrelentless, and he goes, well, you clearly appear to be an ascetic. You've shaven your head and you have all the characteristics, but you say you don't approve of any belief or creed. So what are you doing there running, like a crazy person? which also here, it very much reminds me of my mom, some interactions that we have. So what are you doing? Why are you going around with bed sheets and crazy haircuts? If all the assumptions that I have on religious orders, you're saying that is not the case. So my mom being born and raised in Italy, she has all her assumptions come from the Catholic tradition. So the parallels are very much rooted in what a Catholic nun practices rather than what a Buddhist monk practices. And also how what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. It comes all from the sort of framework that the Vatican imposed on the female monastic orders, which are radically different than the training rules that we have in Buddhism. So whenever, for example, I'm encountering these beliefs or these ideas, and these beliefs are challenged, then my mom likes to use the segue of Māra, like, why are you? Well, if you don't do this and you don't do that, then why do you go around like a crazy person? You could grow your hair and be a Buddhist lay teacher. She told me that lately in Italy, there's lots of Buddhist lay teachers apparently appearing. But anyway, getting back to the sutta, the Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā answers, outside here, the followers of creeds place their confidence in views. So we see a very strong statement from the Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā. The followers of creeds place their confidence in views. And this is what fundamentally we see over and over again, not only in the suttas, but also in everyday life, if we pay attention to it. So just like at the time of the Buddha, there are still up to this day eternalist views, annihilationist views, and all of the in-between practices that lead, the idea that there are certain practices that lead to full purification, animal sacrifices, self-torture practices, that basically by using certain by doing certain rituals, one can attain full purification. And these are all doctrines that the Buddha was pretty adamant in disproving, and also, helping people understand why were they holding these views to begin with. Perhaps sometimes these doctrines were taken, by their own accord, or still to this day, sometimes people take them out of their own accord, or sometimes they're led to take certain beliefs by others. So influenced by perhaps a guru, perhaps a friend, perhaps family. And whatever the reason is, there is a sort of condition to create attachment in the mind, where then we start holding on to these views, affirming that only this is true, everything else is wrong, fundamentally. And that's where and we see that the Buddha was very adamant in saying how not only was this sort of stance not beneficial, but was obstructive towards actual full awakening. So the encouragement is to, in Buddhism, is to first of all understand what is the source through which we have our beliefs and our views. And is it perhaps that we read it in a book? or perhaps it's our culture, perhaps it's our family tradition. Perhaps we've read something or we've heard something and it sounded quite rational. So out of logical inference, we start adhering to that view. Or perhaps we just like it. So we want it to be true. And we start adopting that idea, taking it as a belief. It must be this way because this is my preference. And what the Buddha encourages us to do is to be quite frank, be quite honest with ourselves, and really break this process down and see where our beliefs and our ideas, where are they? What are they based on? And only truly quote unquote believe something if we have a true experience of it. So not believing in something because of these sort of fake quote unquote reasons, or unreliable rather than fake. I guess the right word would be unreliable. They're unreliable because it's based on different causes and conditions that are constantly changing. So if we move to a different country, perhaps we'll read a different book. And perhaps people will have a different culture and different rituals, with different rites and rituals that are in opposition to what we grew up with. And perhaps we're going to see that actually their rites and rituals are much, we prefer them much better than the ones that we came from. Similarly, logical inference are, what we will find rational will change, will shift dramatically. What I find rational these days is what I would find irrational when I was 10, and vice versa. So all of these sort of standpoints are not reliable. But if we realize truth for ourselves, then that's something that we can believe in, because fundamentally it doesn't need any belief. It's something that we know. And this is what the Buddha is pointing out in his teachings. It's to transcend ideas, to transcend views, but rather to understand things as they are. So we see, in fact, then that Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā proceeds by saying, I don't approve of their teachings because they are not skilled in the Dhamma. And it's very important to understand what the Dhamma is. What does she mean by this? So Dhamma is a word that actually throughout the suttas is also used to refer sometimes to the Dhamma of other sects, other creeds. And it's also used, though, to actually mean the Dhamma. So we take refuge not in any type of Dhamma, not in any type of sort of idea of how things are, but rather in the true Dhamma. And so the right approach towards the teachings, towards the Dhamma, is not to think of it as a belief system that we're adopting, but rather sometimes it's more beneficial or more useful to see it, to approach it as a discipline, as a body of knowledge, no different than physics, no different than botany, no different than any type of science or knowledge, body of knowledge that we are not perhaps fully skilled in, fully familiar with, but that we take seriously and as a working hypothesis. And that explains, as we, start studying it, it starts explaining to us the way that things work, and whether or not we believe in it, whether or not we believe in gravity. Gravity does affect our life. Whether or not we believe that a brick is going to fall on our head if someone tosses it from the second floor, it will still fall on our head. It won't really do us much good if we say, I don't believe in that. What it will do, it will be that the brick will still fall on our head if someone tosses it, but we will think that the reason is not that there is some sort of gravity, a law of gravity, that if the brick is up there and it's thrown, it will inevitably fall in a particular way. And then if we are standing underneath it, it will hit our head. But we will create lots of different ideas and views that we will start believing because we're unaware of this fundamental law of physics. And we'll attach most likely to these views. And we will start thinking that only this is true, everything else is wrong. So we see it, for example, when actually, there was the belief that the world was flat several centuries ago, right? And even though the world is, the earth is not flat, when the scientists brought up evidence that the world was not flat, the belief was so strong, so ingrained in the mind of the people that they actually started persecuting the scientists who were bringing up evidence about the fact that the world was not flat. So that's where we're talking about the true Dhamma. So the Buddha is not presenting just his opinions on the world, but rather he is showing us how things are. He's telling us this is basically your experience of the world. This is the workings of the mind. And that fundamentally, it's not sort of a personal experience of truth, but rather it's a description of a truth that applies to every single being. It's a teaching of causality. So even in the part of the Buddhist teachings that we might find peculiar and counterintuitive at first, especially if we're not born Buddhist and we don't have a natural inclination towards confidence in these teachings, when we start exploring the practice better and delving more deeply in the teachings, we see that all it is once again a teaching of causality. When this arises, this ceases. If you put these conditions in place, these will be the results. So in that, Buddhism is very in tune with science, very much of a similar approach. And fundamentally, we need to realize it for ourselves. And then we see that Venerable Sīsupacālā continues, but by introducing the Buddha, so saying that even though she does not approve of all the teachings that are floating around, of all the beliefs and all the creeds, she says, but there's one born in the Sakyan clan, the Enlightened One, without an equal, Conqueror of All, Māra subduer. Beautiful how she defines him. Who everywhere is undefeated, everywhere freed and unattached. So perhaps we can stop here for a moment and kind of break down what is she talking about. So she talks about the Buddha as the conqueror of all. So what has the Buddha conquered first and foremost? What does she mean by Māra subduer? And when we explore, when we understand the mind of the Buddha, we understand that he has conquered pretty much everything. Conquered stinginess, conquered all the kilesas, all the defilements, conquered enmity, conquered fear. When we sit in meditation, we see how we're all of a sudden assaulted by our defilements. But even when we're not in sitting meditation, and we're hopefully still in meditation, talking meditation, walking meditation, cooking meditation, in all of these moments throughout the days, we can see, if we see carefully at our mind, we can see how we're constantly attacked by our defilements. And sometimes it can seem like a lost cause. We're like, oh, wow, I'm just overcome by anger. I'm overcome by fear. I'm overcome by stinginess, perhaps. If we have trouble giving. And we have this sense that we want to do better about this, but it can sometimes feel so difficult. Well, a Buddha has done all that work already, so he has overcome all of his defilements. They're not an obstacle anymore. They have ceased to exist. And that's because he has conquered the army of the pleasant, the army of the agreeable, basically all of Māra's armies, the ways through which Māra comes and tempts us, all the hindrances, all the ways through which we, quote unquote, enjoy ourselves with sensual pleasures and keep craving for them. So no more of that, conquered entirely. And then, of course, conquered old age, sickness, and death, conquered suffering. That's attaining fundamentally supreme nibbana. And so a way through which I wanted to share this quote, actually, from the Buddha, that says, how bhikkhus is a bhikkhu a universal conqueror, when having understood as they really are the origin, the passing away, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in regard to all the 6 spaces for contact, a bhikkhu is liberated by non-clinging. So in that sense, here he understands, he shows the Buddha, he points the way in the right direction, on always contemplating whatever we particularly like, or whatever we particularly dislike, or whatever we don't particularly like or dislike. Fundamentally, anything that we get in contact with, whether it's a smell, or a physical sensation, or a taste, or a sight, or a thought, whatever it is that we interact with, understanding that there is definitely a gratifying side to it. There's a gratifying aspect to this cup, but there is also the danger. The gratifying aspect is that I can use it as a vessel where I can drink. It's great, but there is also the danger, as Ajahn Chah used to say, and how we like to quote him all the time. This cup is already broken, and by that we mean that it's of the nature to break, so it's unreliable. So if right now it falls, will break into pieces, and I won't be able to use it as a vessel anymore to keep drinks in. So understanding that, because actually it is now a cup. Before it was not a cup, and when it will break, it will not be a cup anymore. So understanding that it's inherent quality, the quality to originate and to pass away fundamentally. And so the escape is not wanting what we tend to sort of intuitively go to, not thinking, oh, I need to find another cup fundamentally that looks exactly like this and it's reliable like this, otherwise I won't be happy. Or perhaps, oh, I need to make sure that nobody breaks my cup and has to be with me the entire time so I can safeguard it from all the other people and elements that can break the cup. So fundamentally, in craving for the cup to be permanent, that is not the escape. The escape is understanding that the cup is already broken and seeing it for what it really is and letting go of our craving for the cup to stay, to be in a particular shape and form that we like. So in this way, if it breaks, we can replace it if we find another one. Or we just find another way to drink. This would be totally acceptable. Another way to drink. In whatever kind of circumstance we'll be dealing with, there won't be clinging, there won't be attachment. Hence, we will have created the sort of conditions for happiness to arise. And once we're able to do this, not only for the cup, but for anything and anyone we're dealing with, fully understanding the nature to grow old, to grow sick, and to die, then we can transcend it. Then we are fully liberated by not clinging. And so this is what the work that the Buddha has done. Craving has been entirely uprooted. That's why everywhere he's undefeated and everywhere he's freed and unattached, because there is no craving. And Venerable Sīsupacālā continues by saying, the one with vision who sees all. So what exactly is this vision? And I think perhaps it's clear now that it's the vision of the Dhamma, vision of the path. So vision fundamentally of the truth, of how things really are. Which is why when we talk about enlightenment, we normally use the words of like unshakable liberation of mind. It's a purified vision. It's something that doesn't need any type of work anymore. And it's also irreversible, very important. There is no one then that there's no backsliding anymore. And as practitioners, if we're quite honest with ourselves, we can see how sometimes we make a lot of progress in the path. But just as we make progress, a lot of times we do a lot of backsliding. Also as monastics. It's incredible. It's this constant battle with the kilesas, as we were mentioning earlier. Battle with our defilements. Sometimes the defilements take the best out of us. They win the battle, but then our duty is to get up again on the battleground and fight with all our greed, hatred, and delusion. And the more we do this, the more we're creating the conditions for full enlightenment to happen. At a certain point, we will win the battle once and for all. The other thing that probably is worth mentioning in terms of the one with vision is also that my understanding is that the Buddha is not necessarily omniscient in the way that we talk about omniscience in Judeo-Christian religions, but rather he is omniscient whenever he points his mind towards something. So whenever asked, he points his mind towards whatever is asked, and he understands it clearly and sees it fully. And then Venerable Sīsupacālā proceeds by saying, attain to the end of all karma, liberated in the extinction of acquisitions. So fundamentally, this points again to being fully enlightened. So not creating any more karma and having transcended death fundamentally. So having transcended the conditions for rebirth to happen. The conditions for both birth and death to happen. Hence, for rebirth to happen. And so this is once we are not attached to anything at all, nothing takes hold of us anymore. We're not enslaved, we're not bound to anything at all in the world. Hence, we're fully liberated. And this is what the Buddha is. He's fully liberated. And that's why Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā says, that blessed one is my teacher. He is the teaching I approve. His is the teaching I approve. And that's, once again, not something to be believed in, but rather something to be practiced, to realize for oneself. And similarly to Venerable Sīsupacālā, I approve. Also, Bhikkhuni Soma approves of the teachings of the Buddha. And then Māra, obviously, after this interaction with the Bhikkhuni, understands that the conditions for him to confuse Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā aren't there because she's fully enlightened. So there is no way to attack her or to get her, distract her from the path, because she's already done what needs to be done. So she sees Māra for what he is. And Māra is smart enough, just like with all the other bhikkhunis, to stop wasting his time in a battle that is lost since the very beginning. So realizing the Bhikkhuni Sīsupacālā knows me, sad and disappointed, Māra disappeared right there. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Right, so at this point, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the live chat, and I'll do my try my best to answer them. All right, thank you so much for all your kind wishes for my health. Hello, Robin, welcome. And Michael says, some suttas in this Samyutta Nikaya chapter suggest strongly that the nun in the sutta is an arhat. This is great. closes the question of whether women can become arhats. Am I wrong here? Ignore the irrelevant. Oh, yes, absolutely. So they're all bhikkhunis, and actually not only in they're all bhikkhuni arhats, but also not only in the bhikkhuni samyutta, there's throughout the suttas, Arahat Bhikkhunis. There's actually also a chant that we do, but there's also, that is obviously taken from the suttas, about the great qualities of the Arahat Bhikkhunis. So there's never, that I'm aware of, a question of whether a woman can become enlightened in Buddhism. Absolutely not. What there are some suttas that question whether a woman can become a Sammasambuddha, which is basically what Shakyamuni Buddha is. So someone who comes to this world where the teachings are not available and realizes them all by himself. And we can see how realizes them all by himself, but then also has the perfect conditions to teach others. And first of all, no one these days, whether they're a woman or a man or anything in between, or outside of that, can actually be a Sammasambuddha, and that's because there is only one Sammasambuddha per world system. So anyone, just like we are doing, who follows the teachings of a current Sammasambuddha, so when the teachings are still available in one shape or form, only has the capability of attaining awakening as an Anubuddha, which is basically an Arhat. So that's kind of like, besides the point, whether or not it is true, those suttas are true, that one can only become a Buddha, a Sammasambuddha in a male form. But realistically speaking, there's actually been a lot of scholarly research that those were later additions and later suttas created under the influence of Brahminical sexist views, where it was uncomfortable. So the Buddhist religion, what the Buddha created, the Buddhist orders, were extremely revolutionary at the time, and extremely actually revolutionary to this day. It's the only order where, it's the only sort of quote unquote religious community where both men and women have equal status. So they were ordained, we wear the same robes, we have similar precepts, there is a similar practice. So actually, as I like to say, the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, was not only awakened, he was also woke. Which in my mind actually are pretty much wrapped in with one another. So of course, once he died, there were certain things that he put in place in the orders that were quite inconvenient in ancient India at the time. And of course, a lot of different monastics of other, influenced by other spiritual traditions, were opposed to that. So it makes sense, the scholarly research that has been done that has shown that those suttas were later on additions in order to make things the way that people preferred for them to be. So fundamentally, a creation of delusion. Buddharuchi says, Samyutta Nikaya 5.3 is a good example, or to be beyond Māra's grasp can only be said of stream enters, I think. Well, it depends. So beyond Māra's grasp, one can have also, at least that's my understanding, one can have also a temporary liberation of beyond Māra's grasp. So, for example, transcending the five hindrances. Temporarily, one can be beyond Māra's grasp. But whether or not certain accomplishments are kind of are reversible or irreversible, then we're getting into stages of awakening. And of course, all the stages of awakening are irreversible. And Jonathan says, one should bear caution to the unseasonably warm temperatures, as a return to sudden cold seasonable temperatures could harm immune systems, making one more susceptible to coronavirus. Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing some sensible thoughts of precaution during these times. And Michael says, I think this non-creed teaching is most beautifully exemplified by the abandoning of the raft once we reach the other shore. Well, yeah, I mean, it is true, but also I think that we don't even have to wait that long. So there is... I don't think I've reached the other shore. Actually, it's not that I don't think. I'm pretty sure I haven't reached the other shore. But once again, I think this sutta points to the fact that the Buddhist teachings are not just another belief system. The Buddhist teachings are actually pointing to the truth. The Buddhist teachings are something that we can experience, just like we can experience truth in this moment, here and now. So we don't have to wait that long to see the truth in all of this. It's not like, oh, once the job is done, and then all of a sudden we'll realize that the Buddha was right. We can see it step by step. And Gita says, Ayya, but is there not universal karmic laws? We must develop faith in the teachings, and one will see this and experience this as one progresses on the path. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. So it's just important to clarify what we mean by faith. So normally, when, I was not born or raised Buddhist, so I adopted the Buddhist teachings later on in my life. Well, I encountered them later on in my life, and I started practicing them later on in my life. So normally the average person who's like me, who has been raised in a culture that is predominantly Christian, there is a different way of perceiving faith, which is normally quite dogmatic. So it's something that you are supposed to not question, that there are no answers and no questions that are appropriate on certain quote unquote religious truths. And so the request that is done is to have blind faith and to wait until after death to actually realize the truth of what one is taking on in their lifetime. But with the Buddhist teachings, it's a little bit different. Which is, somewhat connected actually to what Michael, to what I was trying to say to Michael earlier on. So it's not that, once again, one believes fully simply in the Buddhist teachings, but one takes them as a working hypothesis, which is why I use the example of physics, for example. I don't understand anything about the theory of relativity, I'll be quite frank. But that's because my knowledge of physics is very low. Yet I have faith that the theory of relativity is true, because I know that there is a path that I can do, a course of study, of experiential experiments as well, through which I can come to the same realization that Einstein has come to. But of course, if I now try and go and prove the theory of relativity, I would have no idea where even to start, because I haven't mastered the basics of physics. But unless I take, the theory of relativity as a working hypothesis, I won't go through or taking, as a working hypothesis, the fact that there is such a discipline like physics. I won't go through all the steps, and I will never prove the theory of relativity to myself or others. I will never know it for myself, fundamentally. So yes, the Buddhist teachings, once again, we practice them, and we see that anything that the Buddha is pointing out is the truth. And what we can't see, we can't understand right here, right now. Our confidence is based on the fact that everything else that we can actually, that he points out and that we practice, we can see, we can realize it right here, right now for ourselves. And that builds faith, which is, once again, a confidence in the teachings mixed with incredible awe of how magnificent these teachings are and how magnificent the Buddha is to begin with, for having realized the truth. And Gita is also asking, dependent origination is a very important teaching to help us see the karmic law. Absolutely, yes. So karma is nothing more than cause and effect. So you do an action, an intentional action, and you get a result. Very simple. It's not terribly different than sending a resume and then being called for a job, so to speak. It's not that if we like fall asleep when we have sudden amnesia and we wake up and then someone calls us for a job, we might think that it's completely random and weird. But in reality, we have put in place the conditions, the causes for that phone call to happen before we fell asleep and lost our memory. And Gita says, everything circled back to the Four Noble Truths. Yes, absolutely. As the Buddha says, all of his teachings, just like all of the footprints of every animal fit inside the footprint of an elephant, in the same way, all of his teachings fit in the Four Noble Truths. And Michael says, I consider a Dhamma talk particularly successful when it fires up my practice. It is so. Thank you. Oh, great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Eleanor is asking, is Māra just an image? It is not a real human being. So Māra is definitely not a real human being in the way that he is not, whatever real means, by the way, but he's technically not a human being. He's actually a deva. So he is, he's been reborn in a pretty sort of comfortable state of existence. And Māra is very useful to think of him as an actual being. So, as a deva that comes and tempts us and does a lot of like naughty things, but also as the Māra living inside of our minds. So as our defilements coming up and distracting us and shearing us away from concentration. So developing the skill set to actually see Māra as we go about the world. And Michael says, the other story I mean to compare with the Abrahamic religions, for example, because the posit a forever heaven where they meet the personages of importance to them, like taking along the raft. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I mean, there's also obviously very important to highlight the fact that, of course, each of the Abrahamic religions are a lot more complex than normally what we know of. For example, even though I was raised in Italy, I realized that actually the sort of Christianity that was shared with me was a much more simplified version than the depth and complexities than the ones that are in monastic circles, Christian monastic circles. This being said, it's not, it's not something that is easily understandable for my mind or something easily understandable to practice. So I think it's good to make comparisons sometimes, just to see what the different approaches, especially if we have been raised in those type of cultures, and perhaps we can get a little bit confused in similar words like faith used within Buddhism and within Christianity, that can create a bit of confusion, and perhaps can lead us to miss the point of the practice sometimes. But at the same time, it's also not terribly useful to get into too much depth with. We're not trying to do comparative religion studies here. So all we're trying to do is practice Buddhism and attain awakening, hopefully for the benefit of ourselves and others. And on that note, I think that's all for this morning. Welcome to Jen as well. Good to see you. And we'll be meeting again this evening to talk about dealing with overeating, which is one of the fun things that people perceive, in fact, as fun, that are probably happening, especially in these times of pandemic. So if you have any questions, feel free to bring them this evening. And then if you have unrelated questions, tomorrow evening you'll have a monk chat, all with me, because all the other monastics are on retreat. So you get to have private monk chat with Bhikkhuni Soma. All right, so we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.